Hello, and welcome to this presentation that summarizes the findings for North Dakota's statewide economic impact study. Over a year-long period from the late fall of 2014 to the late fall of 2015, this study was conducted by the North Dakota Aeronautics Commission to measure the economic impact of the 89 public-use commercial and general aviation airports in the state. A focus of this study was to compare how economic impacts supported by the airports have changed since these impacts were last measured in 2010. Some of the key findings from this study are as follows. The 89 airports are supporting an estimated $1.56 billion in annual economic activity. This economic contribution from the airports to the state's economy is up 47% from when it was last measured in 2010. The number of jobs in North Dakota supported by the airports has grown from 8,872 to 12,217. So over the past 5 years, the number of jobs supported by the 89 airports has increased by 3,345. State and local tax contributions made by airport-supported activities have also increased. In 2010, aviation-related sales tax revenues were estimated at $31.1 million. By 2015, annual sales tax revenues for aviation had increased to $60 million. Visitors coming to North Dakota by air have also increased, growing over the past 5 years from 545,300 to 915,290. Further, as this study discovered, these visitors are staying longer and spending more, which has a huge benefit to the state's economy. The statewide economic impact study for the Aeronautics Commission had several objectives. One objective was to use a process to estimate economic impacts for each airport that was more transparent. The state wanted each airport to see specifically where their impacts came from and how the impacts were estimated. Another objective was to present results that could be easily understood, particularly by the general public and all elected officials. As noted, another objective was to compare the results of this study to a similar study completed in 2010. In addition to measuring jobs, payroll, and economic activity associated with each airport, the study sought information on other ways that the airports help to support health, emergency, business, environmental, recreational, and other services across the state. A key objective for the study was to provide education to airports on how to interpret and discuss study results. The final objective was to provide easy-to-understand products that help to communicate study findings to all potential target audiences. As part of this study, an estimate of economic impact was developed for each of the 89 public-use airports and for the state as a whole. The next few slides provide information on how the economic impacts for each airport and the state were estimated. On this drive, or on the website for the Aeronautics Commission, there is another presentation entitled Methodology Guide Tutorial. For those seeking a more in-depth understanding of the process used to complete this economic impact study, you can find that information in that particular presentation. For this study, for the 81 general aviation airports, there are 4 potential sources of economic impact. These sources are airport management, airport tenants, spending for capital investment, and spending from visitors to North Dakota who arrive on a general aviation plane. The 8 commercial airports also have these same 4 impact categories, but in addition, they also support economic impacts from visitors to North Dakota who arrive on a commercial airline flight. For each of these impact categories, annual economic impacts were estimated as being a direct impact or an indirect impact. Direct impacts are associated with the day-to-day operations of the airport and the activities and services it supports. Indirect impacts are a result of the direct impacts entering the local and state economies. As direct impacts enter the economy, they multiply. These additional impacts, categorized as indirect impacts in this study, were measured with the in-plan input-output model. Combined direct and indirect impacts represent each airport's total annual economic impact. For each of the impact categories, airport management, airport tenants, capital investment, and the two categories of visitor spending, annual economic impacts are presented in the study for employment, annual payroll, and annual output. For airport management and airport tenants, output is equal to their annual purchase of goods and services to run the airport or to run their business. For capital investment, annual output is equal to the average annual amount invested to improve or expand the airport. For both commercial and general aviation visitors, output is equal to the annual amount that each group spends while on their trip to North Dakota. For impacts in the airport management category, each airport was the source of the information that is presented in the state study for the airport's direct impact for jobs, payroll, and output. Employment for airport management reported in the study considers not only full-time employees working in administrative, operational, or maintenance positions at the airport, but reported direct employment for airport management also considers part-time or seasonal workers at the airport. Direct employment for airport management also considers any off-airport jobs in areas such as human resources, finance, legal services, or accounting that may not be physically located at the airport. Output in the airport management category considers the cost to purchase goods and services to run the airport. Output does not include payroll, nor does it include local or airport funds spent on capital improvement projects. Each airport was a source of information for their direct employment, payroll, and output estimates, and each airport provided verification of this information before it was used in this study. When all direct and indirect impacts at the 89 public use airports are considered, in the airport management category, the airport supports 232 jobs, $13.4 million in annual payroll, and $85.5 million in annual output. Another of the impact categories measured in this study is airport tenants. These are aviation-related businesses located at the airport that provide services to aircraft or airport customers. Airport tenants include businesses such as FBOs, flight schools, concessionaires, aircraft rental or charter operators, airlines, air cargo carriers, and others. It is worth noting that not all of the 89 airports have economic impacts in this category because some of the smaller airports do not have tenants. To measure the economic impacts of airport tenants, all of the 89 airports provided a list of their tenants and contact information for each tenant. There are an estimated 240 aviation tenants at all public use airports. Each of these tenants was contacted to obtain information on their employment, payroll, and output. Some airports have on-site businesses that are not aviation-related, and if so, the activities of these businesses are not included in the results of the economic impact analysis. When direct and indirect impact for aviation-related tenants at all airports are combined, these tenants support the following economic impacts: 4,207 jobs, $223.9 million in annual payroll, and $626.7 million in annual output. Another source of economic impact for most of the North Dakota airports relates to capital investment. Capital investment is often made to improve or expand facilities at the airport. While investment is being made, these spendings help to support jobs and the payroll associated with these jobs. For this particular impact category, economic benefits may not be ongoing. They may last only over the time frame during which spending is actually taking place to implement the capital improvement. Since airports often do not undertake capital improvement projects each year, for this study, a 3-year average of capital investments was used to estimate impacts in this category. Information on capital spending for each airport over the past 3 years was obtained from the Aeronautics Commission, the FAA, the airports themselves, and tenants at each airport, so that both private and public capital investments could be considered. Once direct average annual capital investment or output for each airport was estimated, the in-plan model was used to determine how many jobs the spending supports and to determine the payroll that the jobs support. When average annual capital investment for all public use airports over the past 3 years is considered, economic impacts for the capital investment category were identified as 1,156 jobs, $63.5 million in annual payroll, and $173 million in annual output. Another source of economic impact for almost all airports in North Dakota comes from spending associated with visitors who arrive in North Dakota on general aviation planes. Each study airport supplied information that was used to develop an airport-specific estimate of annual general aviation visitors. To determine how much these general aviation visitors spend per trip on average, over 60 airports and FBOs distributed surveys to visitors to North Dakota arriving on general aviation aircraft. Results from these efforts show that more general aviation visitors are coming to North Dakota and that these visitors are staying longer and spending more. Between 2010 and 2015, the number of visitors arriving in North Dakota on a general aviation plane increased from 222,318 to 382,177. Average spending per general aviation visitor trip increased from $76 per trip to $167 per trip. Many visitors arriving on a general aviation plane spend only 1 day and have limited or no spending in the local community. So the average spending per trip general aviation visitor of $167 reflects visitors who spend nothing and visitors who spend more than $1,000 on their trip. Between 2010 and 2015, total statewide spending for all general aviation visitors increased significantly. This increase is an important driver for the increased economic impact reported for North Dakota's airports between 2010 and 2015. Some airports also have transient or visiting aerial applicators. When these individuals are operating from a North Dakota airport, they have spending for lodging and food. This spending was included, when applicable, in the visitor spending category. When all spending associated with general aviation visitors is considered, this spending supports direct and indirect economic impacts, which include 854 jobs, $26.9 million in annual payroll, and $101.1 million in annual output. The 8 commercial airports also support economic impacts from visitors to North Dakota who arrive on a commercial airline flight. Estimates of commercial visitors were developed for each of the 8 commercial airports, using their total annual employments and the information from the USDOT that shows what portion of these employments that are visitors as opposed to residents. Visitors arriving in North Dakota on a commercial airline flight completed more than 4,000 surveys that provided information on how long commercial visitors stay and how much they spend by category while they're in North Dakota. Between 2010 and 2015, the number of visitors to North Dakota arriving on a commercial airline flight increased from 322,983 to 533,112. Survey information shows that average spending per commercial visitor trip has increased from $325 to $677. With the increase in visitors and spending per trip, total visitor spending has also experienced a notable rise. Results from the current state study show that direct and indirect economic impacts from visitors arriving on commercial airlines support 5,768 jobs, $177.6 million in annual payroll, and $578.1 million in annual output. When impacts from all 5 categories, airport management, airport tenants, capital investment, and both visitor categories are considered statewide, all 89 public use airports support the following annual economic impacts: 12,217 jobs, $505.2 million in annual payroll, and $1.56 billion in annual output. As noted, one of the study objectives was to show how airport economic impacts increased between 2010 and 2015. As shown, when all direct and indirect jobs are considered, the number of jobs supported by the airports is up 38%, having increased from 8,872 to 12,217. Payroll supported by the airports also has increased by 38%, increasing from an annual estimate of $365.8 million in 2010 to $505.2 million in 2015. Direct and indirect annual output for all impact categories is up by 47%. Total annual economic output for the 89 public use airports increased from $1.06 billion to $1.56 billion. As these last few slides have shown, economic impacts associated with and supported by the airports have experienced a significant increase over the past 5 years. As part of the state study, annual economic impacts associated with Air Force bases in Grand Forks and Minot, aerial applicators not based at one of the 89 public use airports, aviation or aerospace businesses not located at one of the airports, and jobs that have improved efficiency from their use of airports and aviation-related services were also quantified. Data on annual economic impacts for both Minot and Grand Forks Air Force Base were obtained directly from each military installation. These impacts reflect both military as well as civilian personnel employed to support each base. Data obtained from the 2 military facilities shows the additional following annual economic impact: 9,850 jobs, $426 million in annual payroll, and $717 million in annual output. Research conducted for this study shows that in addition to aerial applicators that are based at one of the 89 public use airports, there are other aerial applicators in the state that operate from non-public airport facilities. There are approximately 20 off-airport aerial applicator businesses in North Dakota. The annual economic impacts for these businesses were estimated as part of this study as follows: 156 jobs, $5.6 million in annual payroll, and $15.6 million in annual output. In the case of these off-airport aerial applicators, their annual output is associated with their costs to purchase goods and services to operate their individual business. Throughout the state, there are various businesses engaged in producing aviation and aerospace products. There are about 75 of these businesses in the state. These are aviation-related businesses that are not located at one of the 89 public use airports. Therefore, the economic impacts associated with these businesses are in addition to those previously reported for the public use airports. Some of the businesses that fall into this category include Cirrus Aircraft Manufacturing in Grand Forks and UTC Technologies in Jamestown. When direct and indirect impacts are considered, these off-airport aviation and aerospace businesses support the following economic impacts: 4,479 jobs, $227 million in annual payroll, and $497 million in annual output. The final additional economic impact category relates to jobs throughout the state that benefit from, rely on, or gain efficiency from using aviation. This category of impacts includes a business in North Dakota who has employees that rely on air transportation to carry out their job responsibilities. It includes additional staff in the Aviation Aerospace program at the University of North Dakota who are located on campus, not at the Grand Forks International Airport. It also includes freight forwarders or travel agents. Both of these job categories are dependent on aviation. For this category, the following additional direct and indirect economic impacts were estimated as part of the study: 5,513 jobs, $272 million in annual payroll, and $883 million in annual output. This chart provides a summary of all airport, aviation, and aerospace-related economic impacts that were identified in this study. As this chart shows, when all categories examined in the study are considered, combined, they are supporting the following direct and indirect economic impacts: 32,213 jobs, $1.44 billion in annual payroll, and $3.66 billion in annual output. As this graph shows, when all 32,200 of the airport, aviation, and aerospace supported direct and indirect jobs are considered, these jobs represent approximately 8% of all employment in North Dakota. When all direct and indirect annual output is considered, the $3.7 billion in output represents 7.6% of North Dakota's 2014 real gross state product, which was estimated at $48.2 billion. In addition to economic impacts related to jobs, payroll, and output, airports in North Dakota also make a significant contribution to state and local tax revenues. Research conducted in the study shows between 2010 and 2015, aviation airport-related tax benefits have increased significantly. Study research identified the following tax-related benefits supported by the 89 public-use airports. Tax revenues from the sale of aviation fuel have increased from $1.5 million to $2.1 million. Tax revenues in this category are up 39%. Most of this increase is related to North Dakota's increased number of commercial airline flights. As a result of the sale of more expensive general aviation planes, aircraft excise tax is up between 2010 and 2015, from $650,000 to $2 million. This is a 200% increase in this category. Airports and airport customers contribute to many types of sales tax revenues. In the sales tax category, airport-related sales tax revenues have grown from $31.1 million to $60.2 million, an increase of 93% in 5 years. The state study also conducted extensive research to identify other types of benefits that the 89 public-use airports support. There are hundreds of employers and thousands of jobs in North Dakota that rely on the commercial and general aviation airports. Residents use the airports for leisure travel and to stay connected with family and friends. There are dozens of healthcare facilities in the state that rely on the airport system. Doctors fly to smaller communities to provide healthcare services locally, providing a significant benefit to the individuals and families who benefit from these medical services. Unmanned flight by UAS and UAV is an emerging industry, and North Dakota is seen among all of the other 49 states as being the leader for this exciting new technology. The University of North Dakota's aviation and pilot training programs are viewed as the best collegiate aviation programs in the country. Over 30 million acres of North Dakota are devoted to agricultural and ranching activities. Aerial applicators play an essential role in increasing the productivity of these activities that are essential to the state's economic well-being. This graphic provides insight into how airports in North Dakota connect the state to markets across the U.S. This map shows FAA-reported flights. These flights represent only 3% of all operations that are accommodated each year at all North Dakota airports. As this summary slide shows, aviation is a major contributor to North Dakota's economy. As the airports continue to grow and develop, it is reasonable to expect that economic impacts will also continue to increase over time. More information on the state study can be obtained from the North Dakota Aeronautics Commission.